Hi, welcome to this episode of Sneakers and Strategies. I'm your host, Nick Kastner, Director of Brand and Digital Strategy at Forum Communications. In this week's episode, I'm going to interview Pat Magill. Pat Magill currently serves as the partner and practice lead for restaurant and food service at Retail Strategy Partners, as well as the executive in residence at the University of North Georgia's Mike Cottrell College of Business. That's actually where we met a few years ago. He was volunteering at the university, and I had him speak in one of my MBA classes. Prior to joining UNG in his current role at Retail Strategy Partners, he actually served for 20 years at Coca-Cola and also has some agency experience as well. So Pat is a longtime marketer, well known in the industry, and I think someone that you'll enjoy hearing from. So I hope you enjoyed the episode, and as always, contact us at Forum Communications, forumspeaks.com, if we can help you with any of your marketing efforts. Enjoy the interview. So, Pat, first, welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate your time today. I'm going to let Pat tell his story and how he got where he is today. But Pat is a colleague from my time at the University of North Georgia. He served in agency and corporate marketing leadership roles throughout his, I'm going to say, storied career. He may disagree, including account leadership at the marketing store, helping design Happy Meal toys for McDonald's, and serving in marketing leadership at Coca-Cola. Now Pat serves as a partner and practice lead in restaurant and food service for Retail Strategy Partners, a consulting firm. So let's start from the beginning, Pat. If you would, why marketing and how did it all start for you?
Wow. Why marketing? Why not marketing, Nick? No. It's funny. When I left the University of Illinois with a bachelor in arts and really not a lot of direction, to be honest. I was not a very good undergraduate student, and hopefully that's not such a bad thing for your subscribers on this one, since I know you deal with a lot of students. But I was not. I learned how to play hearts, spades, poker, and a little euchre if you're from the Midwest. I had a radio show. My thought when I left college, I went to Chicago. I was gonna be the next Saturday Night Live star. So when I went to Chicago after I left the University of Illinois, my goal was to get into the Second City Training Center, learn how to be an improviser, and see where that took me. And so I actually did that for a couple of years. I never did anything worth noting because I lacked what they call talent. No, I mean it was just no, I didn't lack. I mean, I did lack talent, but it was one of those things where I did that for a little bit, but it was pretty clear though that the direction I needed to go was someplace else. And so I went back to school, and in that I landed on marketing because I think it kind of connects back to that area that I dreamt about going to, because marketing really is a little bit about storytelling, right? Even if it's I mean, I guess if you think about the 4 Ps, the storytelling lands a lot in the promotion P, obviously, but it has to be supported by everything else, and everything else kind of works into the story. So I really like that aspect of storytelling, and the idea of being able to tell the stories of brands as they went forward. So I mean, I guess that's kind of how I landed there, and became it became the somewhat love of my life.
So how did you land at the marketing store?
So the marketing store worldwide, I landed there because in between my first and second year of getting my MBA at Loyola University of Chicago, I needed an internship, as so many of your students are probably looking to do now, and those that that are in there. I needed to get an internship. And I wasn't really afforded the opportunity to have that when I was in undergrad, because I was working my way through school and trying to figure it all out. And so in between my first and second year at Loyola, I was looking, and it was, trying to find one. And my wife says to me, why don't you just send a note to McDonald's in Oak Brook and see if you can land there? And she's like, you worked there when you were 16, you worked there during summers at college, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And so I just wrote a letter. I wrote a letter to the This is back in the day when you actually wrote letters. I typed it, but I signed it in ink, but I did type it. But I sent him a letter and basically said, look, and it was a letter that basically expressed how McDonald's had been part of my life since I was 16, in the sense that I, like I said, worked there while I was in high school, and then I would come back and I was the open up setup guy during the summers at the local store, and so that meant I got there at 11 o'clock at night and took the restaurant apart, put it back, cleaned it, put it back together, opened the store, and then unloaded a truck. So it kind of also gave me, you know, we kind of talk about connecting into restaurants now. It gave me that view of, you know, what the inside workings of a restaurant really are, and how later in life I would have looked back and realized how there was a connection to the story, right? Making sure everything worked. Anyway, that letter arrived on the desk at Human Resources at McDonald's, like within hours, I'm told, of an intern not working out that they needed for the summer. And so like within a week, I had a summer internship at McDonald's Corporation in family marketing, which was Happy Meal toys, birthday parties, play place, and Ronald, right? In fact, I've got a great story sometime about spending some time with Ronald working on the field marketing guide, which was a lot of fun back in the day. But anyway, the marketing store was one of McDonald's agencies that did Happy Meal toys. It was a promotional marketing agency at the time. When I first joined, it was called MV Sales. We later merged with the marketing store, which was a UK based promotional agency, and now it's the marketing store worldwide. And so I ended up at the marketing store through McDonald's. It was a long way to get there, man. I'm telling you what, this is probably what's supposed to be a 20-minute thing, and it's going to go 4 hours because Pat Magill is on. I'm sorry.
No,
But yeah, that's how I ended up at the marketing store, which is great. I loved it when I was an intern. I loved working with the creativity and the toys and all the different things that went into it back in the day.
So, some of your favorite campaigns that you got to work on while you're at the marketing store?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of great on a lot of great campaigns. I was there for the Teenie Beanie Babies when they were going on. I didn't lead that particular one, but it was kind of like my first job there. So I was driving around all the gift shops in the greater Chicagoland area, trying to collect as many as I could so that we could think about how that would go. I was also there when McDonald's was in a 10-year agreement with Disney. So we worked on a lot of great Disney. I got to go to the premiere of A Bug's Life, which was a lot of fun. So those were fun. But I think of the ones that I touched, the one that sticks out to me is kind of like maybe just a little bit of a favorite. I don't know if it was the most successful or not. But it was one that I loved. It was a Barbie Hot Wheels Happy Meal, and we connected in. It was the 50th anniversary of NASCAR, and so we, for the first time, I think, for a Happy Meal, they had done this before, where McDonald's had done promotional cars back when McDonald's was racing in NASCAR. But we created a couple cars that would be Hot Wheels, which in the Barbie Hot Wheels Happy Meal, and then we made the promotional cars that actually raced on the track the same week that they were in the Happy Meals, right? Well, in fact, behind me, this guy right here, this is something that they had given me, but I'll just show you. He's kind of the Ronald McDonald one, right? So got Bill Elliott raced that back in the day. And we did a Mac Tonight one, and then we did one that was connected to Hot Wheels, and one that had a 50th anniversary. And every week they raced, and and that one, for some reason, I just loved the way all that connected, right? So you had the NASCAR aspect of it, which at the time McDonald's was really heavily into, and it was great. So you had that kind of promotional thing happen, and then you pulled the string through to the Happy Meals, which then also pulled the string through to Hot Wheels from Mattel, and they had a relationship at the time in NASCAR as well. And so like everything kind of ticked and tied together. I mean, this was like 30 years ago, but that one sticks in my mind as one of the ones that I liked, and I think it was because everything connected well.
Sure. I mean, that's what do we talk about now? Omni-channel marketing,
Yep.
right? And that's what
Sure.
you were doing, right?
Yeah, it was great.
Can you tell me about the worst campaign, right? Because I know you spoke to my class some time ago, and you talked about some of the campaigns you had, and there was one story that I thought was
Yeah, well,
so.
I wouldn't say it was a bad campaign. I would say that I know which one you're talking about. I worked on a Happy Meal. It was the a Little Mermaid Happy Meal, and the campaign itself was fine. I wouldn't. It was great. I think the reason I brought up your class was it was the worst for in terms of my performance. Like the way I handled it. We had some toys that the spec called out that they needed to float, and they were engineered to float. It's just that they didn't necessarily float at the time upright. So you had fish that looked like when they were in the water they were dead, and all sorts of stuff. So we actually had to re-engineer them back so that they worked properly, and that's, I'm sure that it did back in the day. But at the time, it really taught me a lesson, especially about project management and marketing, both in terms of the product requirements, and then really the product expectations, and how you need to make sure that you're asking the right questions and making sure that you're thinking in terms of the consumer at the end when you're doing that. So, a toy that a toy that was supposed to float, that was a fish that floated upside down, that's a terrible thing for a kid to have. It looks like it's, whereas if we had thought, and we did, and we fixed it, and it was fine. But for me, it was, if you want to call it the worst, I'm going to say it's the worst only because of my screw up, and it had to be fixed later. But I always talk about that one because I think, and I think you talk about leadership a lot with your classes and others. It's, the idea of failing forward and learning from your mistakes is a real important one as you go through your career. And in terms of failure, I might be the best in class failure you ever meet. No, just kidding, I don't know. But that's why that one was mentioned, and it was a great learning, actually.
Yeah,
and a lot of fun. Actually, looking back on it, it's actually one of my favorites, just because we had to problem solve around something to make it right.
Well, I realize now the reason that I attached to that story so much is my cousin collected all those toys.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah. So I remember that one in particular.
At one point, we used to get them all, and it was one of those things where you don't know what you have until you have it. But every month we would get as working there, we would just get toys that have been manufactured. We all got our own samples, and I was like, oh yeah, and we're from all over the world too. So I was just like giving them away to kids that needed them or whatever. And then later I'm like, man, I had a full set of Teenie Beanie Babies and I don't anymore. That kind of thing. But you never know you never know back then. You're just kind of working. This is literally like 30 years ago, I think.
Sure. Well,
I started when I was 2.
Yeah, that's it. So with after the marketing store, you then went to Coca-Cola.
Okay.
And so can you talk about how you got started there?
Yeah, it was just more of a career progression at that point in time, right? Like, so I was on the agency side of things, and I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed working with the customers that we had, and it was a great place to be. But I kind of had a desire to get onto the client side a little bit, and even though a lot of what I did at Coke was very similar to what I was doing at the marketing store on the agency side, but job came up, and it was Coca-Cola, right? So like it was at the time, the brand in the world, and it hasn't diminished. It's just that you've got like Google and others that have come up since that time that are sharing that space. And I was like, of course I was going to go there. This was the brand to work on, and still a great brand to work on, as a matter of fact. And so I got there, and I worked. Actually, we moved to Kansas City to join. Overland Park, Kansas, actually is where the office was. And I worked with our bottling partners in the area on local market restaurants, so mom and pop restaurants. So we got to work with people either just starting out or had a concept that was popular in certain areas, but not so big that they were on a national side. And that's how I got started at Coke. And then after a reorganization that they had in 2003, I got moved to Atlanta, and worked in a couple of the headquarter marketing roles until I think, I landed on the Wendy's account at one point. It was on there for several years. It was a great place to be within the company, and I learned so much from being on that from that team, both in terms of leadership, but also in terms of understanding data that is like draws the picture of a business, right? And so looking at product mix and things like that, and how everything worked with each other, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
So
So,
yeah.
well, I would just so I know obviously during your time you progressed in different roles. Were there certain aspects of the work on the client side at Coca-Cola that were your favorite? Like what were the your
You
favorite
know,
things that you did at Coke?
I mean, first of all, just working there, I mean, I was very proud of the 20 years that I was there, you know, and I left part of I took a voluntary package after 20. It was like, I enjoyed it. I really treasure my entire time there. And the number one thing that I always think of is the people I got to work with, both in the company and in our bottling partners and in our customer partners. Just working with such great people, right? You know, some of my best friends in the world. I learned so the people were always number one, and it's not just like I'm not just saying that as a throwaway comment. There was a certain um, type of person that you got to work with there that was always positive, always looking for the best possible outcome for the company and for the customers, which was great. Always looking for the best way to do things, and so that was number one. And in terms of roles, I mean, um, I think I learned the most from understanding the business when I was on the Wendy's account. So I really enjoyed that. And I got to be exposed to some great leaders that worked at Coke during that time. And then in later roles, leading people and then eventually getting into commercial planning and channel strategy. What I really liked there was from a leadership perspective, learning that different people are different. All people are different people, as they say on Ted Lasso. The just learning how to deal with the fact that different people are motivated by different things, and you have to be aware of the impact of what you do, because I failed forward a lot there too, right? You got to learn, you know, oh wow, I was thinking, I said this, and I thought it would be taken this way, and then when you see, you know, 3 out of 5 people took it completely different, you're like, oh, you know, you maybe think about how you put those things, and so I loved learning that, and then I loved at the very end, being able to work across all the different packaging that we had at Coke, from you know the fountain machines to bottle can to you know, depending on where it was, larger pack sizes, but because of the different customers that we had within all of what we called food service and on premise, which included at work, dining, specialty retail like Home Depot, Best Buy, things like that. So I really enjoyed learning all those things, and I think um, if there's anything that I would say was what was it was the people, and it was constantly learning new things. And somebody once said, and I'm sure others can say this, but somebody once said, you know, in the first year at Coke, you can learn 80% of everything you need to know, and you'll spend the next 30 learning that next 20%. And it was kind of a nice way of saying, it's like, look, there's always something new around the corner, always a new way to do something, always a new innovation that can come, always a new consumer that you want to have a relationship with. So
Sure. So now, and this is kind of how we met. You started engaging at the University of North Georgia, and where I still teach,
yeah.
and now you are the executive in residence at the University of North Georgia. So why are you now supporting students in higher education?
So I got involved with the University of North Georgia through the University of North Georgia Foundation board, which I'm proud to serve on. And you know, I've always had a passion for higher education, period. But any kind of education, truly. My mom was a teacher, my wife is a teacher. I understand at least secondhand what that means, right? And it's a huge responsibility, and it's great. And the thing though is that what I noticed about my mom, I'm sure, but definitely with my wife, is that her best days are when she impacts somebody's life in a way that takes them on a trajectory that is positive for them, and they will say something to her that makes her know that that's that. And I've always liked that. I've always liked the idea um, of learning and being ready for, you know, what's happening in the world, etc. But University of North Georgia, mean, that was kind of lame, that last part, wasn't it? Always that learning part is what I like about with the kids. And I mean, good one, Pat. We'll talk about this. Maybe we'll have to cut this part out, Nick, at the end.
That's okay.
No, but I think that when I think about the University of North Georgia in particular, it's a really amazing place. And I had no skin in the game whatsoever, really. I came from Illinois. I just was a connection to a connection that landed me there. I was really happy to do it. But the more I learned about that university, the more I was like, wow, what a gem exists. Not only in the sense that it's a lot of people know it as the senior military college in Georgia. It's one of 6 senior military colleges across the country, like Citadel, Virginia Military Institute, but also like Texas A&M, right? Mm-hmm. So it's got a program that is significant, but it's not a huge percentage of the university in terms of student body, but it does have a huge impact on both the university's brand, but also the type of student that is attracted to go there. The other component of it is that the University of North Georgia is spread across the northern part of Georgia over 5 different campuses, right? And the students that come there, especially those that are coming into some of the other campuses, but a lot of students that come there, they're what I like to refer to as scrappers, right? They remind me a little bit. I don't know if I was so scrappy, but they remind me of me in the sense that when I was in school, I worked 3 jobs. I was working 65 hours a week with a full class load at one point in time, just trying to make it work. And none of those hours were playing cards. Regardless of what I said earlier in this conversation. And it's tough in it, but I have a lot of respect for anybody that's doing that, especially in today's day and age where so many have other means and by which they're able to not worry about such things as how am I going to eat this week, which some of our students actually do, by the way, and yet they're making it. And I've said, and I'll say that I'll take a scrapper with a B average over a straight A kid that I mean, I'm not downplaying straight A kids, but I really like working with them because they're just so eager and so hungry and so ready to just lean in. And I think when you get into your career, you realize that to be successful, you do need to like lean in and constantly try to get better and better. I think these guys, and I say guys as from the north, that's translated down here as to all y'all or y'all. So right. It's you guys is a northern thing, but that they are just so awesome to be around and so fun to connect with people that just want to get better constantly. Mm-hmm. And so that's what drew me there was the idea of connecting in. What's kept me there is absolutely what a gem it is of a place with all the things that it has going on. I mean, if anybody that really wants to see something impressive, check out how many Fulbright scholarships and finalists that this university pumps out every year, not just now, but every year. The cybersecurity, the component is it's world class, right? The new building that for the Mike Cottrell College of Business is state of the art. It's wonderful up there in Dahlonega. So that's kind of, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot, and there is, and it really has been a great place for me to connect into. So I was really, when they asked me to be an executive in residence, I was like, sure. And so I mean, it's what that means is, every couple of weeks I'm up there and I get to interact with faculty and students and that kind of thing. So yeah.
I think that's great. So I know that's not the only thing you're doing now, though.
No, right? So, I take 4 or 5 naps a day.
So can you talk to me about your new role at Retail Strategy Partners, right? So
just joined up with Retail Strategy Partners to principal lead on the restaurant side of things. The company itself is what I love about the company, and why I said yes to join, is that their focus and attitude is about creating value. It really is. It's I mean, in the general sense, it's about commercial strategy and enablement, capability building, right? But the process and the maybe call it the attitude or the point of view is always about where is there value to be created, whether that is helping a company create more value that they can extract value from, or from which they can extract value on the other end from a consumer or customer, or if it's understanding the value needs through voice of a customer and being able to translate that back into how do you bring the power of your company to bear to answer that in a way that's mutually beneficial for its growth, right? And what I love about that is that it's got that positive thought of moving forward, growth, sustained growth, and a relationship across the value exchange that happens between customer and company. That if you get it right, you really create that virtuous flywheel, right? Where things continue. You've satisfied customers who are getting what they expected more, and they continue to buy, and you have a company that is constantly evolving and working to serve those customer needs, and working with companies to find where there's opportunity there is really exciting to me. So that's why I joined, and what we'll be doing is focusing specifically on that, both in terms of restaurants themselves and working with them on their supply relationships and seeing how that can be maximized, all the way to those that are trying to maximize a relationship, maybe if the customer is a restaurant, right? And or if it's a restaurant that's looking to maximize its value exchange between consumers that walk through the door. But value creation is at the core. And growth.
So with that, what do you think the biggest challenges are for restaurants and on-premise food service, that sort of business now?
Well, I mean, it's the pandemic. You could say that the pandemic changed a lot. I think that in terms of restaurant, I think what the pandemic did is accelerated a lot, right? So the move to a digital relationship between, for lack of a better term, between the restaurant and the consumer was already happening, and it was going to happen. It just happened really fast. So the number one challenge I think that you have right now, the big guys are doing it, and they know, and they were already kind of down the path because they knew. I think it's those some, not all, a lot of people are doing it right, don't get me wrong, but the challenge for some is, while we made it, we weathered through the pandemic, which in and of itself was a challenge. And now we're in a world in which we really need to ramp up toward this digital relationship, in addition to every other kind of relationship with consumer. And I think that for some restaurants that were coming that way, that could definitely be a challenge. I think labor obviously is a challenge that everybody's facing right now. And that is in twofold, right? On the one hand, obviously getting good people, it's critical. In a restaurant, more, in my opinion, and I'm biased, but more than any other brand, the brand that is created in the mind of the strategist within the company and you see on TV is only as good as the experience a consumer has when they're either in those four walls or they're interacting with that restaurant for their own needs, right? And so, labor is critical because the experience that a consumer has is dependent on great labor. And so finding great labor is going to be important, but then also because it's kind of a shortage, it's a shortage, the cost of labor goes up. And look at a balance sheet of any restaurant, labor is going to be, if it's not number one, I'd be interested to know what goes beyond it, because labor is get crazy expensive. So then when you match that in with what's happening in terms of technology, right? You could have situations in which technology takes the place of the human, right? And so in some cases that will make concepts extremely more effective and efficient, which then creates more, going back to your question of challenge, more challenges for those that are lagging in that sense.
Yeah.
But then I think the thing that's going to be interesting as we get into, restaurants that, let's say, are automated, right? I have not seen anything that convinces me that you can eliminate the human touch completely, right? And different concepts that will be part of their brand, and so that makes sense. But it'll be that balance of how much efficiency versus how much like true human interaction exists that is good for the consumer. Because ultimately the consumer will decide, and we'll know as we go along, right? Because we'll see which concepts and which modes of interacting with restaurants are the ones that are, unfortunately to say it this way, the winners, and the ones that aren't, right?
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting, this conversation, for this reason. So over the weekend, I read a
God,
study
I'm glad
that,
somebody thinks it's interesting because I'm
yeah,
talking
it's
like,
just
holy
me.
cow.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
me. That's it. The There was a study done that said the most overrated skill for upcoming marketers, overrated, is social media. Like, they interviewed marketers and said that there's like 25 to 30% of marketing directors say that social media is overrated because there's a lack of understanding about the experience, right? I mean, the
Hmm.
experience is the thing that should carry across every channel.
No.
And so if that's not being done, like you're saying, I mean, when it comes to digital delivery, in-store experience from a labor perspective, all those things, if those things fail, then it doesn't matter what you put on social.
Yeah, it's tough because overrated doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It just
Correct.
might
Yeah.
be, right. So that it's kind of hard to react to it and be critical of, either agreeing with being critical of social media or not.
Right.
What I would, because I actually heard a pretty darn good argument once that the Beatles were overrated, right? So
Yeah,
the
right.
greatest rock and roll band of all time,
Right.
but maybe people are like, yeah, but were they that good?
Right.
So, and I only say that because, like, I want to make sure that I'm saying this right, because social media is hugely important,
It is. Yep.
as we all know. What I would say to that is, I don't necessarily know if it's overrated. I would say that sometimes, it's
And
not it's not as thought out as it should be,
sure.
right?
Yeah. So
And
social is not overrated from a usefulness standpoint,
right.
but overrated from a skill set standpoint,
Oh, I
looking at recent
apologize. Yeah, yeah,
graduates, right? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, on the one hand, if I make a broad stroke generalization that graduates are of an age, right? They're going to be social media is going to be like, wiggling your fingers. It's part of them,
right.
right? So from that standpoint, it may be overrated only because it's like, well, yeah, we've already got that, duh.
Right.
The other aspect of it, and I noticed this when I taught the class there, at not yours, but a different class, when we were talking principles of marketing, and they would have separate chapters for social media, right? And as I would teach it, I would sit there and, but really and truly, there's nothing different about marketing through social media than any other kind of marketing,
Right.
other than technology has enabled a tool in which you are able to grow a relationship in a different way, right? So the idea that yeah, CRM can create a situation where everything that your customers want and like and need, and I would say, okay, that's not new. 19th century general store, the shopkeeper knew what items to keep stock because of the people that were coming in, and they would talk and they would know each other. The difference is a scale of maybe 100 to millions, and the technology has enabled that relationship with millions, is one small example. So maybe from that standpoint, but I mean, it kind of gets to a point where I think you're going to see, hopefully at some point in time, marketing departments start to say, we don't need a separate social media arm. It's just marketing. These are the tools, right? So that, from that standpoint, I would
Yeah.
agree, right?
Yeah.
Does
And
that make
that's, I
sense?
mean, yeah, it
Yeah.
does. And that's how I see digital. I don't think digital needs to be a separate department. It's just part of
Okay.
what you do, right?
Unless unless it's in the practical application,
Sure.
right? So like
Right.
knowing the technology and how to make it, but in terms of, um, and if you get detailed into it as a channel for that, yes.
Sure.
But in terms of it being a different kind of marketing,
Yeah.
it's
It's
still it's still marketing,
marketing,
right?
right?
It's just using different technology to do. I think what's great and what's been exciting that I've been able to witness through my career, and I'm continuing to witness it now. And what I really think is cool is all these things that we're now able to do, we always wanted to do. Now we have the technology that we're able to do it. Like
Right.
the things that are happening, we talked about it like
Right.
25 years ago. We're talking about, man, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? Or the promise of, everything being connected might enable us to do this. And now it's like we're doing it, and then some, like stuff you never even imagined.
Right. Right.
And I love that. I think it's so cool to see.
Yeah, and I think there's a next level coming, right? I mean, there's
Sure.
a ton of stuff about Web3 and single login and all this other stuff. It's going to get, it's just going
Yep.
to continue to change.
Yep.
So, all right. So this podcast is called Sneakers and Strategies. What is your favorite pair of sneakers?
Yeah. Well, that question I was like hoping we'd run out of time, but I'm a fan of Asics
Yeah.
sneakers.
Okay.
Yeah, I have found over time that it is um my go-to when it comes to athletic sneaker wear. Now, I got some Allbirds for Christmas from my
Hey, okay.
son. So um just when and I hope those, I'm sure now that I have them, their popularity has peaked because, as you can probably tell, I'm the coolest person. I like those too. I like the versatility of those just because they're a lot easier to wear. They're more comfortable than dress shoes, but they work out just fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I mean, from that standpoint, I would say those. Now, my arches don't allow this to happen,
Okay.
but give me the Chuck Taylors any day of the week and twice on
Hey.
Sunday.
Okay. Yeah.
Any
All
day of
right.
the week and twice on Sunday, I'll take the Chuck Taylors, which a high top version were the shoes I wore to prom.
Oh, okay.
But it's all me that I have an issue with. I can't. My arches my arches don't handle that anymore, and
Yeah.
I'm dating myself once again.
Hey, the Chuck Taylors are back. My kids wear them, so
Oh my
it's
God, they're the best.
yeah.
My
So
wife wears, because when my wife and we were just dating, in that time, Doc Martens were so huge, right? These aren't technically sneakers,
mhm.
and she always goes to class and they're back now, everybody's wearing Doc Martens again, and she has her students guess when she bought them, and when they found out that they're like 30 years ago or whatever, like what, and they're still in like great shape because
Right.
they're awesome. Anyway,
Yeah, I
I
remember
didn't
the
mean
Doc
to I didn't mean
Martens.
to insert Doc Martens
No,
into the sneaker
no, it's
conversation, but
good. It's fun.
yeah, so yeah.
So, all right. So, if someone wanted to work with you at Retail Strategy Partners, how they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you could email me at patrick.magill, Magill, at retailstrategypartners.com. And we have our websites out there as well. And feel free to reach out, or LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. And I don't know what all the things are, but it's Patrick Magill on LinkedIn. I mean, I don't know how many of us there are, but there I am. So
Okay,
those are
cool.
the ways to get me. And knock
Well,
yourselves out. I'm around.
well, Pat, thank you for taking the
Yeah,
time
thank
today to
you.
be on the podcast.
Oh,
That's all we have. As always, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you need assistance in your marketing efforts, feel free to reach out to our team at Forum. Forum is a full service marketing agency that helps our clients find their voice in a crowded marketplace. Until next time, as Benjamin Franklin said, either write something worth reading or do something worth writing about.